My girlfriend's family constantly mocked me in their native language, thinking I didn't understand. So I secretly learned it for months. I never imagined that a language barrier could become the spark for a revolution in my life. For years, I attended my girlfriend's family gatherings feeling like a ghost among the living, a silent observer, unable to join the chatter, unable to laugh along without feeling that deep sting of exclusion. Every time I walked into a room filled with laughter, every whispered joke in their native tongue, I was reminded that I was an outsider. But one day, when their mocking tones grew too heavy to bear, I decided that silence was no longer an option. I chose instead to let those very words inspire me to reclaim my voice. I remember the very first gathering vividly. I stepped into a dining room, alive with warm chatter and rapid-fire exchanges, in a language I couldn't grasp. The smiles seemed genuine, the conversations fluid, and yet, behind those bright eyes, lay a cruelty I couldn't yet understand. Laughter erupted over jokes that I couldn't decipher. I smiled awkwardly, nodding as if I belonged, even while every fiber of me screamed that I didn't. The sharp sound of ridicule, cloaked as humor, cut through me silently. I knew then that I was being laughed at, not with them, but at. And that night, as I lay awake, the echo of every misdirected, barbed word fueled a determination I had never known before. In that moment of isolation, I made a promise to myself. I would learn their language. I wouldn't allow any more subtle cruelty to define who I was or where I belonged. So, when the house grew quiet and everyone else drifted into sleep, I began my secret mission. I dusted off old textbooks, downloaded language apps, and armed myself with dictionaries and grammar guides. Each night, illuminated only by the pale blue glow of my screen, I pored over lessons. At first, every syllable was a struggle, foreign and clumsy on my tongue. I fumbled with sounds and tangled with grammar rules, yet with each mispronounced word, I felt a small ember of defiance ignite. Days turned into weeks as I mapped out the intricacies of a language that had once been used to humiliate me. In the deep silence of my room, every lesson was a declaration against being marginalized. I practiced phrases in front of my mirror, slowly coaxing out words until they came with a cadence that began to feel natural. It wasn't just about learning to speak, it was about transforming a source of humiliation into a tool of empowerment. Every late-night study session became a testament to my resilience, every painstaking repetition a stitch mending the tear in my self-esteem. As the weeks melded into months, the transformation was gradual but undeniable. I began catching snippets of conversations at subsequent family gatherings, bits of jokes, cultural references, tender moments of shared memory. I started to understand what had once been a barrier, the subtle nuances behind idioms, the playful inflections that carried both humor and history. Behind every line of dialogue, I uncovered layers of tradition and emotion that I had never seen before. Understanding their language began to reveal the beauty behind their banter, the warmth behind their teasing. Then came the pivotal day, the day everything would change. I was invited once again to a family dinner. As the room filled with familiar laughter and banter, my heart pounded, not with anxiety, but with cautious anticipation. This time, I resolved to join the conversation in earnest. With trembling confidence, I uttered a phrase in their tongue, a simple sentence meaning, "I understand you now." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. I watched as curious eyes met mine, and in that quiet moment, something profound shifted. The laughter was no longer a weapon aimed to belittle me. Instead, it was intermingled with surprise and, eventually, a grudging respect. The change wasn't explosive. There were no dramatic confrontations, no grand speeches announcing my transformation. It was a slow metamorphosis, almost imperceptible at first. A nod here, a gentle smile there. My family-in-law began to weave my new words into their conversations. They'd pause, then repeat phrases in my slightly broken dialect, as if testing my resolve. Every successful exchange was a small victory, a defeat of the old narrative that had once cast me aside. The more I spoke, the more I was seen as part of their world rather than its perpetual outsider. Over time, I discovered that the language was not a gatekeeper, but a bridge. The very words that once mocked me became instruments of connection. I learned phrases that conveyed humor, sadness, pride, even love. I listened to their stories, jokes, proverbs, and slowly, I began to answer, not just with rehearsed lines, but with genuine emotion. My voice grew steadier, more sure, as I exchanged playful banter and subtle repartee. I started to see that what I'd interpreted solely as cruelty was often a peculiar, cultural way of bonding, a flawed attempt to include me, even if clumsily. But the journey was not without its setbacks. There were nights when I felt the weight of every mispronunciation, when every complicated sentence reminded me of the steep climb ahead. I would catch myself wondering if I was foolish to think I could ever blend into a world that had made me feel so excluded. Sometimes, frustration overcame me, and I almost gave up. Yet each time I recalled those painful moments of isolation, I found a renewed spark. I remembered that every stumble was a step forward, every awkward pause a declaration that I was trying, that I was here and I was learning. One evening, after a particularly challenging day of practice, I stood before my mirror and recited phrases until my voice cracked. I repeated them until they transformed from awkward sounds into words that resonated with meaning. In that small, solitary moment, I felt a profound connection to the language, a realization that each word was a tool to carve out my identity. I wasn't learning their language just to fit in. I was learning it to define myself on my own terms. In that mirror, I saw not a misfit, but someone who had taken control of his narrative, turning every sneer into a stepping stone towards empowerment. And then it happened, the breakthrough that would rewrite my story. At a subsequent family gathering, while the conversation flowed around me like an ever-changing river, I contributed a full sentence in their language without pause or hesitation. The room fell quiet for 2 long seconds, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Then, slowly, a murmur of approval replaced the awkward chuckles of before. I had not only managed to speak the language, I had earned a place in the dialogue. My voice, once silenced by alienation, now rang out clearly, proudly, and authentically. The transformation wasn't simply about learning to speak, it was about understanding the heart behind the language. I began to appreciate the history, the struggles, and the traditions woven into their words. I sought out their music, read their literature, and absorbed the culture that had been shrouded in mystery. With every new proverb I learned, every story shared, I found myself no longer standing on the outskirts, but firmly planted in the center of their familial tapestry. Now, as I sit among them, I see how laughter has evolved. It's no longer the weapon of exclusion, but a sound of shared camaraderie. With every joke that flies across the dinner table, I respond in kind, sometimes with a perfectly timed phrase, sometimes with a humble, self-deprecating smile, acknowledging that my journey is ongoing. My transformation is not marked by perfection. It is celebrated in every imperfect yet sincere attempt to communicate. I have come to understand that the language I once feared had the power to unite rather than divide. It transformed ridicule into respect and isolation into inclusion. Every word I now speak in their tongue is a reminder of my resilience, a tiny revolution in each syllable. I embrace the truth that no one should be defined by the language they do not speak, and no barrier is too high when your spirit is set on breaking free. So if you find yourself marred by mockery, if the laughter of others seems to echo louder in the hallways of your memory, remember, every word you learn is a step toward liberation. Let the pain of exclusion fuel the fire of determination and transform every whispered slight into a bold declaration of self-worth. Your journey, though it may be laden with frustration and uncertainty, carries the potential to reshape not only your destiny, but also to dissolve the walls that divide us. In sharing my journey with you today, I hope you see that defiance isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about speaking with authenticity, day after day, until even the harshest voices can no longer silence who you truly are. My story is one of quiet rebellion, meticulous perseverance, and above all, the unwavering belief that each one of us has the strength to rewrite our narrative, word by word, moment by exquisite moment. Thank you for listening to my story, a story of reclaiming dignity, bridging cultural divides, and discovering that every language, no matter how foreign, can eventually become the very key to belonging. May you find the courage to break down your barriers and let your voice be heard, for in each of us lies the power to turn even the sharpest mockery into the melody of our triumph.